interesting aspect of her life relative to organ donation. And in the conversation back and forth, I get this one email that says, yeah, I just presented to the UN. And I'm thinking, the UN? Wow, this really is somebody that I don't know at all. And I wrote back, I said, where in the UN did you do this presentation? She meant UNOS. Oh, that makes more sense. So with that, Stephanie, come on up. And you have your plug-in you're going to do?
I do.
Okay.
Okay. Hi. Hi. Aren't those some good-looking people? Yeah. I'm Stephanie. I want to thank everybody so very much for allowing me to come and share my personal story of what I do for a living and how my life intersected with my profession. I actually brought my sister-in-law with me, sort of, so I'm going to go ahead and pass these around if you want to take a look. She's here to lend me a little helping hand. That's my sister-in-law, Lynn. Okay. So, I'm from Gift of Hope in Chicago, and for almost 3 years it's been my privilege to be a donation specialist. About a year and 20 days ago, my personal and professional lives collided, and I also became part of a donor family. In our time together, I hope that I'll be able to shed a little bit of light on what an organ donation specialist is, how we work to support families so that they can choose the option of donation, and how we make organs available for transplantation. I also want to really drive home how important donation can be in the lives of donor families. Okay. Now, there. A little bit about Gift of Hope. We serve 180 hospitals in our service area, so we have the northern three-quarters of Illinois and northwest Indiana. It includes 9 transplant centers with 31 different transplant programs, and it represents one of the most concentrated transplant areas in the world. When I applied, I used to work for an adoption agency, so I went literally from the beginning of life to the end of life. And when I applied to work at Gift of Hope, I really didn't know anything about organ and tissue donation other than I had been asked at the DMV if I wanted to be a donor, and I thought, yeah, that sounds like something, not today, not tomorrow, but you know, at some point that might be a good thing. During the interview process with Gift of Hope, I was under the impression that I would be doing more of a education and outreach, sort of a community development role. I didn't quite understand the concept of actually being the person who would go to families and talk with them about giving the gift of life when they were facing the loss of a loved one. However, I thought, you know what, I grew up in a bar in northern Wisconsin during the 70s and 80s, and if there's one thing I can do, I can pretty much talk to anybody about anything. So I thought, how hard can this be? About 3 weeks into my new job, I realized I had it completely wrong. I would be doing a little bit of education, but I would actually be going to the hospital every day talking to families of the deceased or the nearly deceased and asking them to walk through their own souls and through their own pain and consider giving the gift of life to someone else. If I said I didn't think about calling my boss at the Cradle, where I used to work back, and begging her to take me back, I'd be a liar, because that was a really scary prospect. I didn't know that I could do it. But the universe provides, and there are no mistakes, and this truly is the work that I was meant to do. The mission, as we've all talked about, sorry this slide's a little bit out of date, but we've all talked about it, we all know it. I think probably this room more than any other room knows so dearly how critical the mission is that we do. So what is a donation specialist? I'm specially trained to clinically evaluate patients for possible organ and tissue donation. I provide education to families about the option of donation so that they can choose it as a safe and realistic option for themselves, for their family, so that it's not, as we talked about earlier, it's not so surrounded by myth and misperception. And if that person who is in the hospital is in the first person donor designation, then it's my responsibility to counsel their family through that process. I feel like there should have been a picture there. Sorry. Oh, there it is. Really, what we are is more like Jedi. When I tell people what I do, they often, they're like, I don't get it. I found that taking a humorous approach, like when I tell people at parties or wherever I happen to be, I'm an organ donation specialist, they're like, I don't get that. I'm the person that goes to the hospital and talks to the family, and they're like, you see this reaction on their face, like, how can you possibly do that? And the answer to the question is, I'm a Jedi. I'm specially trained that way. My kids actually love this answer. They helped me create it. So I said to my kids, what is a Jedi? Why would this be a cool answer for the question? And we went on to Urban Dictionary. And my three favorite definitions were someone from Star Wars who resembles a psychic, except he or she fights chaotically. It's true. They can levitate things with their mind. I can do this when I've been highly caffeinated. They foresee the future. Sometimes, at least when I see my kids getting into something, I can kind of put the dots together. They can sense a presence, and they always use their powers for good and not evil. And I like to think that donation specialists are very good at doing that. Other definitions are someone who's highly skilled at almost anything when it comes to mental battle, and they have lightsabers. I really wish I had a lightsaber. My personal favorite is that Jedi are they're the fighter at the hierarchy, and they can be pirates and ninjas. We also follow the Jedi code, I think. There is no emotion, there's only peace. There is no ignorance, there's just knowledge. There is no death, there is only the Force. As a specialist, it is my privilege to bring order to chaos. Very, very rarely is the only thing that the donor family contending with is the loss or the impending loss. These families are in what some of you may in this world have referred to as hot states. They're emotional, they can't think, they can't hear, they go from being cold to being hot, to being hot to being cold in the span of seconds, nanoseconds. They have a very, very difficult time processing information. You have to repeat things many times. You can say things 10 times and you still can't hear it. I learned this firsthand. There's no question that I haven't heard, and there are absolutely no dumb questions. So we truly do obliterate ignorance. We come with knowledge of the process. We come with knowledge of the benefits. There is no death. There's only the Force. Donation is hope. It truly, truly helps the family who is facing the loss to know that something good can come from something so bad. So, when I got settled into my job and I realized what I was actually going to be doing, I found that I liked it. And I think I'm pretty good at it. Just to give you some perspective, when I was fully trained, it took about 6 months, it takes about 6 months to get a donation specialist off the ground and running. And we go through probably, I can't even put a total of a number of hours of training that I've been through in order to learn how to connect with families. That training is so incredible that it includes, like, our organization, Gift of Hope, actually uses a group called Effective Arts. I'm totally going off script here. And they bring in actors who have a connection to donation. So they're either a transplant recipient or a donor family. And they role play with us. So our leadership gives them actual case studies and scenarios that our donation specialists have been faced with throughout the year or throughout whatever time frame. And they set it up, and you have to role play with those actors what it would be like to actually have a conversation with the family. Because I like to think we're a lot like doctors in that our primary responsibility is to first do no harm. And you're walking into a room with a family who is traumatized, whether it's a spontaneous aneurysm or it's a gunshot wound, they're emotionally traumatized. And your words are very, very powerful. So you better pick them wisely and know what you're going to say and say it well. Just to sort of give you some perspective of how often I do this, since August 2010 until yesterday, I have approached 90 families who are facing the loss of a loved one, and 70 of them have said yes to donation. So whether they have been legally declared brain dead, or whether they have been at a point where their family has realized that there is no hope, and they've made the decision to withdraw life-sustaining therapies, and those people become a donor after cardiac death. Does anybody know what that means? Yeah, okay. Yeah, question? No. No, okay. So I feel pretty confident that Gift of Hope set me up well to be able to do the work that I do. So when people, as a side note, sometimes when I laugh and tell people that I'm a Jedi, like sometimes when you go to parties and you tell people that you're an organ donation specialist, tell me more. So it used to be when I first got married, my husband's a firefighter, and we would go to parties and he'd say, I'm a Chicago firefighter. And then I would just tune out because it would be like, he's a hero, we all get it. So then I started doing this work, and we would go to parties now, and I'll say, you know, I'm an organ donation specialist, and I can actually see out of the corner of my eye, my husband will check out, and he'll be like, there we go again. So sometimes it's safe just to say you're a dental hygienist, because nobody wants to hear about dental hygiene. So, okay, so I've had the profound, unique opportunity of working with families of all races, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all cultures, all faiths. My patients have been accident victims, suicides, gunshot wounds, strokes, hangings, drownings, smothers. They've been elderly, they've been my age, which we're not going to discuss. They've been children, you name it. The one thing that is true in every single case is that patient is somebody's son or somebody's wife. They're somebody's somebody. So it doesn't matter how they ended up in the bed in the ICU. They're someone's someone. It's a gratuitous image of my children because it's all about them. The one yawning is my son Emmett. He just turned 7. The one pretending to be a sweet little angel sleeping is Jack. And Lola is our 3-year-old Doberman. Don't tell the kids, but she's my favorite.
I was going to say, does she resemble your husband?
She actually does. It's funny. And you know, they both sleep in the doghouse. They have a lot going on. Okay. Speaking of my husband. So we were standing in my kitchen one day after I'd come home from a particularly grueling case involving a pediatric donor. I had been up for about 22 hours and was literally feeling like I was jet lagged with pure exhaustion and sleep deprivation. And Craig asked me, do you really like what you're doing? Because I looked like 10 miles of bad road, I'm not going to lie. And I said, you know what, I do. I love it so much more than I ever thought I would. And I kind of felt like, what is wrong with my psyche that I like to go hang out with people in so much pain? But I really do. But I did have a concern that what if this work was preparing me for something that I just couldn't foresee? And God, she's a very funny girl, said, you are being prepared. And I wasn't ready, but the universe provides and things happen the way that they're supposed to happen. So on July 10th at 7 in the morning, oops, I gotta go back, I think. There we go. Bear with me. Okay, this won't play, but at 7 o'clock in the morning on July 10th, my mom called me. She said, my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, this is the part where I might get teary, feel free to join me. My mom said that Lynn was at St. Luke's Medical Center in Milwaukee. She had suffered a spontaneous carotid aneurysm. She was on a ventilator, and her condition was grave. This could have been any dispatch that I would have gotten from Gift of Hope. This could have been any call that they would send me out on to evaluate a patient for brain death. But this was my sister for 20 years. She took me to my first rock concert. She taught me how to curl my hair. She told me that if I did not go to college, she would personally hound me for the rest of my life for the mistakes that would follow, and she was right. And I thought, this can't be happening. This isn't real. This is not my life. This is my work. I hung up the phone with my mom, and I went in the bathroom and I threw up because I was just so shocked. And then I jumped in my Jeep and I drove from Chicago to Milwaukee in 62 minutes in rush hour traffic. So clearly, I have a guardian angel, and she can drive as fast as I can. This is our litter. Walking into her ICU room, I had a sense of tunnel vision. I can vividly remember my heart beating in my ears, and I could not see out of the corners of my eyes. It was literally as if I was looking in a tube. And I saw the tubes that she was connected to, and the ventilator, and all of the medications, and I truly, truly became scared. And then I became really, really mad. Really mad. Anybody here remember the show The West Wing? One of my favorite episodes is Two Cathedrals, when President Bartlett, the greatest president this country never had, went into the cathedral, and after losing his confidant, his secretary, was so mad, and he stood at the altar and cursed God. And I won't torture you with my Latin, but basically what he said was, "What did I ever do but give you thanks, O Lord? Am I really to believe that these are the acts of a loving God, a just God, a wise God? I was your servant here on earth, and I spread your word, and I did your work." Standing in Lynn's room, I so wish I spoke Latin, because that's how I felt. How could you do this? She is a mother and a wife, and she was the breadwinner, and they need her. Her husband, my big brother, and my two nieces desperately need this woman. Over the next 26 days, Lynn underwent 2 brain surgeries, multiple angiograms, CAT scans, and cognitive assessments. Because of my work at Gift of Hope, I was in a unique position to help my brother and my family understand what was happening. I really, really thought that because I had been in an ICU so many times and I'd seen so many scenarios and so many families that I got it. I thought I got it. I did not have a clue what these families go through. I did not have a clue. In the short term, Lynn's surgeries and treatments were a success. She was stabilized and extubated, and her memory was impaired, but at one point she was walking, talking, telling jokes. She had some motor delays, but she was going through PT, OT. She was going to be discharged. And I thought, pretty glad I didn't go cursing God, because we got a miracle. Or did we? This is Lynn on August 7th, just a few days, actually the day before she earned her angel wings. It's my brother. On the 7th, it was a Sunday afternoon. Beautiful, beautiful day, not too much humidity, which is really remarkable in Illinois in August. We had visited Lynn in the hospital, and we went up to the rooftop healing garden, and we all sat watching the planes from the Milwaukee Air Show. And it was warm, and it was sunny, and there was a gentle rain in the afternoon, and Lynn laughed. And I remember her looking up and asking, "What is that?" And I said, "It's rain." And she said, "It's beautiful." And she was right. Driving home that night at about 6 o'clock, my husband and I felt so lucky. And we actually sighed and thought, wow, she's going to make it. It's going to be hard. There's going to be hard days ahead. She's going to need a lot of therapy and a lot of support, but she's going to make it. I got home at 8 o'clock, put my kids to bed, and the phone rang. Again, it was my mother, and she was hysterical. Not an uncommon experience, but this was real. I couldn't understand what she was saying, and when I finally put the pieces together, I learned that Lynn was back in the ICU, that she was back on the ventilator, and that she was going to die. When I left at 6 p.m., she was eating a piece of apple pie, which is exactly how she would want it to be. And she suffered a deep brain hemorrhagic stroke. And within 2 hours, she had lost all brain stem function and become brain dead. So, once again, I jumped in the Jeep. And this time, I knew what was going to happen. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind what the next 48 hours were going to hold. This time I couldn't drive, so we got there slower. My husband drove. And on my way, I called Wisconsin Donor Network hotline, and I said, you are going to get a call from St. Luke's on a 43-year-old female Caucasian. She's had a deep brain hemorrhagic stroke. She's missing all of her neurological function, and she's my sister. Please, 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 do not let anyone approach my brother about organ and tissue donation until I get there. And the person, I explained who I was and where I worked, and there was a pretty poignant moment of silence where the person on the other line said, I understand. When I got to the hospital, my brother came to me and said, they're going to make me pull the plug on her, aren't they? And I said, no, they're not. I explained what an apnea test was like, and I walked him through the process of legally declaring someone brain dead so that he could understand that at no point was he going to have to make that decision. And then he said to me, someone who does what you do is going to come and talk to me, aren't they? And I truly, my heart broke. In that moment, the world came crashing down around me. I said, Ken, you don't have to do this. This isn't about saving other people's lives. This is about Lynn. You don't have to choose donation. And he said, is there any way that they can save her? Is there anything that they can do to bring my Linner back to me? And I said no, with tears pouring down my face. And he said, I don't know where he became so wise, because he's my older brother. He used to tie my ankle to the bathroom door and leave me there for hours. Very wise. He said, then she should give what she can so that someone else can live. It's what she would want. So Lynn, our angel, saved at least 5 people. She donated all organs and tissues. And what we know so far is that her heart and 1 kidney went to a 34-year-old mother in southern Wisconsin, and her other kidney went to a 50-year-old man on dialysis. I hope that someday in the future, please stop crying, I'm so sorry. No, I'm not, keep crying, it means you get it. I hope someday in the future we can learn more about the people whose lives she has saved. So, I'll never try to convince anyone that donation is the right thing, that everybody should choose donation, even though I believe it. However, I feel every family deserves to have the opportunity to choose donation. Why? Because donation has the power to transform death. Patients just don't die. Lynn didn't just die. She died, and in doing so, she gave the gift of life to many others. She's a hero. And everyone, regardless of how they die, deserves to be a hero for someone else. By giving the gift of life to another person through organ and tissue donation, part of Lynn will always live on. Losing Lynn has been, without a doubt, one of the most significant events of my life. It's profoundly changed the way that I work, and it's galvanized the path that I'm destined to travel. Before having lived through the donation experience on the personal side, I really thought I understood what donor families go through. I had no idea that it was so much more life-changing. There's no mistakes. I would give anything to have Lynn back. I so greatly miss walking into a family party and her big, she was only like 5'0", and I miss her hugs so much. I miss when she used to get excited, she would clap like an otter. I'm sad that her kids won't get to know how awesome of a sister she was. But there's no mistakes. And through her death, her gift of life and the blessings that she has left will continue to go on. They go on in the people that she saved, and they go on in me. And though we lost her, I'm so much better able to help the families that I work with see that there's hope beyond death. So where does this take me in the future? This summer I was accepted into the Master of Science program in thanatology. You get the same look that you get when you tell people you're an organ donation specialist, and when you tell them you're going to be a thanatologist, they're like, what? Thanatology, as you can see, is sort of like, it's the study of death and dying on the deceased and the bereaved, but it's also sort of where spirituality and sociology and religion all meet. And I think it is the perfect education for working with families who are considering organ and tissue donation. My hope is that moving forward as a donation specialist, I'll be able to help others face death in even better ways. Lynn's legacy lives on. It lives on in me, and I hope that after today, it lives on in you. Thank you.
I really do think you ought to go to the UN and cheer. Don't you? Wouldn't that make a difference in the world? If we all felt just like you're feeling right now with her sharing so deeply. Wow, God works in strange ways, preparing her for the job she's doing. Like she said, never be the same, right? Amazing.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. Go ahead.
A couple of years after our daughter had an emergency liver transplant, a very close friend of our family fell off the top of a ladder. Why would a man with nobody there be up on the top of a ladder? But that's another story. His wife found him on the garage floor, and he was, they were just maintaining it. You know, we went and we sat with her, and he was great. They were just keeping him there until his daughter could come from Washington State. And I asked her if anyone had approached her about transplant, because I was a believer before our daughter got a liver. She said, well, nobody said anything. And I felt one part of me was going, come on, he's in decent shape, you know. He had like a C3 fracture. But I didn't know where to go with that, because I didn't want to push her. You know, hey, you gotta get there and find somebody to take his organs. And his son, who is an endocrinologist at the University of Pittsburgh, was there, and he heard me say it, and I thought, I can't push these people anymore. I mean, they knew about our daughter, and I didn't know where to go with that. All I did was love it. I couldn't push it verbally anymore. What would you have done?
I'd push because
they're crazy at that time.
They are.
Really good decisions.
You know, know, it's funny. So a little bit about how the donation process works from a technical perspective. Organ donation is so important that the government actually says any hospital that receives Medicare or Medicaid funding is required to call their local OPO for every dead, deceased, or every eminently dying patient. And there are some nurses, a lot of nurses frankly, who are like, I can't make that call because this family is having the worst day of their life. How can I make their day so much worse by having them face something so horrible? But what I will tell you, as a donation specialist, I've seen it 100 times, and as a donor family, the worst day can't get any worse. It already happened. The worst thing that could happen has already happened. So somebody coming to me, if I were in that situation, when I was in that situation, and saying, it doesn't have to end here, it doesn't have to end this way, is a gift. It's a gift. And I've had mothers of children throw their arms around me and thank me for offering them donation. I've had wives whose husbands have died tragically at work who have thrown their arms around me and thanked me for being honest and saying that there was something good that could come from something so bad. Because when the worst happens, nobody knows what to say. Nobody knows what to say. And oftentimes people think, hospital staff think, especially clinical people, their job is to help families. It's to give to families. So the idea of taking organs away is really hard for them to wrap their brain around. But then when they realize that you're not taking organs, you're giving the gift of life. You are giving that family the gift of knowing that their loved one's death, they didn't just die, they became a hero. So I would push, gently.
Well, I hope I never have that experience to do what you're stating again, because it was dreadful.
Call me. I'll come out.
Well, you know, when you said that you called the transplant hotline, I was thinking, shoot, I could have done that, and they could at least have been making contacts into the hospital.
All you ever have to do is tell your nurse. They know how to find us.
Okay.
They all know how to find their local OPO. And thankfully, I do have to say, I've even seen an improvement in the 3 years that I've been doing this work. The way that organ donation has evolved in building relationships within hospitals, it is not adversarial. We have done so much education and so much relationship building that I have 11 hospitals that I work directly with out of our 180, and when I walk onto a unit, whether there's a patient there or not, if I just go to round or to say hi or do whatever, I'm part of that team. So there's no more animosity of, well, you know, here come those organ people and they're gonna, you know, try to hurt my patient, my family. It's not like that anymore. They realize that there is a benefit in donation and that sometimes people die. And when they die and the worst has happened, they can do no more, but we can. Any other questions?
I was just going to ask, who evaluates? Is it the hospital staff that evaluates a person before they call you to say this person may be a candidate?
That's a great question.
Donation. I mean,
what's the criteria? Sure, it's a great question. So there are specific criteria that the government sets out. It's actually through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, and they send out regulations as part of requirements for participation. And they say there's anybody that's on a ventilator with a life-ending injury who's missing one or more brainstem reflexes, or anyone who's on a ventilator with a life-ending injury and the family has chosen to withdraw life-sustaining therapies. So there's 2 triggers that alert the staff to call.
well, the reason I ask is because this past March, my father-in-law had pancreatic cancer that spread rapidly. And they were more or less just keeping him comfortable. He was cognizant probably the last 2 days. just kind of, prior to that, slipping further and further away from us to where he wouldn't react to only certain people. And we knew the cancer had spread through him quite rapidly. When it shocked me that when I came in one morning after having gone to breakfast with my husband, we were there at the hospital constantly, that someone approached my mother-in-law. And it really surprised me, because I thought, wait a minute, who's evaluating this? You know, they know that he's got cancer and that's all through him. That there couldn't possibly be much, if anything, that hasn't been touched by the cancer. What happened here?
It could be for medical education and research.
I never got it.
When my dad died, my dad had metastatic renal cell carcinoma, and I just like to say that because it makes me sound like I know what I'm talking about. It just rolls right out. I don't know what that means. I know he had cancer, and the same thing, you know. And again, that too was a surreal situation because, you know.
Because of course, you know, my mother-in-law was basically in a fused state.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know if she heard the entire, you know, what they were asking her.
Yeah.
And like I said, my husband, of course, he just kind of, you know, went nuts, and I'm like dragging him down the hallway, just calm down. Yeah, I never thought research, because it just, you know, it really surprised. Well, they, you know, because they know about the, I had a living related transplant, so they know.
And it's not, you know, it's not a, it's not like what we talked about at dinner parties. So, if I don't make it, I'd really like to do something good for science, but, you know, we don't talk about it a lot. But it is an interesting option, and I think it is equally as important as donation for life-saving and life-enhancing. I mean, my brother's been a diabetic since he was 7 years old. I would love to wake up tomorrow and find out that somebody donated a pancreas and we now know what the cure is. We're never going to get there if somebody doesn't donate for
My
science.
husband's diabetic too. So,
Any other questions?
What's the main reason that people give for refusing to donate?
Oh, why do people give for refusing? Well, the real answer is fear. It is not anything, it's fear. Oftentimes the way they are treated in the hospital will impact their decision about donation. Oftentimes, like I said before, very rarely is the death the only thing the family is contending with. So when you have unresolved issues in a family context and you find out that that person is going to die, you really have to come to grips with that quick. And I think a lot of families go into protection mode, and they really feel like, number one, when you're in a hospital, you lose all decision-making capacity, because when the staff is working to save your loved one's life, they're not asking you, do you want this patient to be on a, you know, ventilator? Do you want me to give them DDAVP? Do you want me to, no, they give it to them because they're saving that person's life. You don't have a lot of input. But when somebody like me goes to a family and says, you have the choice for organ and tissue donation, it's the first time they have control. And when you're in a whirlwind of being out of control, having the ability to say no to something and feel like you have control over it is a comfort. So I think a lot of times they say no because they want to have control. So a lot of what we do is so not even seen. Like, I'll be on a unit 6 hours before I ever even go and talk to a family. And I'm working with the staff, making sure that family has blankets, making sure they have hot coffee and cold water, making sure they have tissue, making sure they have sugar. Things that they don't even know that we're coordinating from the background with the hospital, so that we are building up to a meeting that has made it okay to have a conversation. And I think truly that's where the success comes in. Oh boy. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go.
I understand that you also don't know your father-in-law's actual medical history, but in a general sense, circumstance like that, couldn't they still be appointing a donor?
Probably. I'm not a doctor, I just play one Monday through Friday.
Have you ever experienced approaching a family and I don't want my loved one to be a donor, and the donor is already designated?
Wow, you should have been with me the day before yesterday because the exact same thing happened.
What was the question?
The question was, have you ever approached a family and the family has said no to donation, but the person is already a first person donor designee in the registry? And the answer is yes. It just happened to me on, what is today, Friday, so Thursday. It happened to me on Wednesday. It's very challenging. This is why the work that we do with hospitals is so important, to prevent physicians and nurses from pre-approaching the staff about donation, because if the staff goes to the family and says, do you want them to be an organ and tissue donor, and they say no, and then we come in and say, but look, they're in the registry, now we have a conflict. And so something similar happened this week where I went to the family with the staff. We had the affidavit from the Secretary of State's office, and it was not what the family wanted for their loved one. But interesting, I don't know if everybody knows this, you probably do because you're very smart and much more involved in donation than most people. Donation doesn't fall under, it's not like an advance directive, it's not like any other piece of law. It's actually under gift law. So it falls under like giving monetary gifts. So if my husband wanted to give, a donation to fund research for why he's so awesome, which is never going to happen, he could do that. He could do it. Nobody can take that right away from him. That money would be allocated and that's where it would go. Organ and tissue donation actually falls under the same law. Nobody has the right to overrule your personal decision to commit to give your organs as a gift. The OPO, in our case Gift of Hope, is the custodian of that gift. So we are legally responsible for fulfilling giving that gift. So it is a very difficult situation. It's really a difficult situation. And sorry, did you?
So what happened?
We went forward with donation. We did a lot of work with the family to try to help them get to a place where they can understand that this was his decision. We may not agree with it, you may not agree with it, but this was his decision. He voluntarily, of sound mind and body, made this decision in July of 2010, and we moved forward.
And how was the family responsive to the medical area and you after that happened? Were they angry?
Yeah, they're not happy. They're upset about it. They're upset about it. But the hope is that the work that we did in that moment, again, I would argue two things. Number one, we did the right thing. As an OPO, we did the right thing. We honored that person's decision to make a life-saving gift. The other thing is that we did good work. We didn't just do the right thing, we did good work. And so they may be angry right now, but now is now. And 6 months from now, when that person has changed somebody else's life, hopefully they will come to a better place of peace with it.
But our question is different. The question is how to get cooperation from the angry family who didn't want it to happen, that you needed to move forward with organ donation.
They understood. The hospital.
So they finally accepted it.
They accepted it.
Okay.
The hospital supported us as well, and we all came together as a group and said, this is the law. And they signed all of the paperwork. They completed the med-soc. They complied. They didn't like it, but they complied.
One last question in the back.
Have you ever not gone through with the donation when you had a first person saying that the family doesn't agree? Or do you?
I can't think of a time because generally the focus is finding out why they don't agree. And as we talked about before, a lot of times it's because there's something missing. There's something they don't have to give them the ability to say yes. So we figure out what that is and we give it to them. So we walk them through, we have conversations like, tell me what your husband was like. And they'll say, he is the greatest man. He would give you the shirt off of his back. He would do anything to help anyone else. Well, they've just given you what you need to give them back so that they can say yes. Does that make sense?
I'm going to close this with one thing that I heard a couple of years ago down in Washington at the National Donor Recognition Ceremony. We took a tour down to UNOS in Richmond. And on the bus, somebody shared a story that stuck with me. I use it in presentations all the time, which would complement what she's just saying. And it was a story about a father who was facing the loss of his spouse and declared brain dead, and the two daughters who were advocating for organ donation. He was saying no, he couldn't face that. And so they continued that conversation down in the hospital's cafeteria. And it was an angry confrontation going back and forth. And one of the orderlies came over and said, "Excuse me, sir, can I say something to you?" "Yeah, what?" You know, you can imagine. He says, "It's not a question of whether your wife is going to be an organ donor or not. She will be an organ donor. The question is whether you're going to donate to the ground or to save somebody's life." And he walked away. And the father turned to the two daughters and said, "We need to go back upstairs. We have some paperwork to complete." When you put it in those terms, there's no decision. And so I use that often to really convey that message that you've conveyed so well here. Take that back with you. Okay, it was a gift. I pass it on to you. Secondly, God's telling me not to do this, so I probably shouldn't. But I'll mention it. One of our board members 2 days ago passed on the New York Post article of somebody in her role who was suing the New York OPO because he claims that they were forced to coerce doctors into declaring brain death. And, you know, very strongly so, et cetera, et cetera. When you read the article, you say, that can't be right. And I was going to put her on the spot because it looks like she can handle this pretty well. But I'm not going to do that because it's another half-hour conversation. But think about this, and if we have an opening any place, I'll bring you back up if you want. You know, from your experience, does that make any sense at all?
I have a short answer
Go
for
ahead.
it. It's very short and simple. It is a physician's responsibility to declare a patient brain dead. It is nobody else's responsibility. They shouldn't be forced into it. They should want to do it because they give that family the gift of peace of not having to face the question of withdrawing support on a loved one. If they're dead, declare them dead and allow that family to process and move on in a healthy way. It's a gift.
So when you hear that story out there, somebody brings it to your attention, just augment it what Stephanie's telling us here, because it's in the public eye. And you know, you read it in the paper, it must be true, right? This guy is suing, it's on court. Be interested to see what happens. But so now you've got a valid answer to give, which leads into our next presentation. But before that, I'd like to say thank you to you, and this is the best of success, a treasury of inspiration. You've been an inspiration to us, and we hope that each day, when you start your day, or when you get in those tough spots, you can open up this book, think of this day and all these people here who say thank you.
Thank you. All right, who's got my sister-in-law? Can I have her back?